Hello, my name is John Milburn. I'm a course coordinator for Central Queensland University. Thank you for joining me today. I'd like to speak to you briefly in relation to the presentation of your work generally, and more specifically, presentation of your assignment work. It needs to be done in a very professional manner. I'd like you to present your work as if you're acting in practice and you're working in the trade. There are no prescribed forms, for me at least, but I will provide you with some very clear guidelines, and I'd like you to consider those and follow those guidelines. Firstly, in terms of presenting assignment work for me, when uploaded, I'd like you to present it in Word, not PDF format, please. Do submit your assignment on time, and if not, you will suffer a deduction of 5% per day for every day of late submission. That's university policy. Note, however, that I may nominate a cut-off date wherever I will decide not to accept any late work. Any extension application must be made before the due date, and it must be supported by appropriate material, for example, medical certificates. Ensure that you do not exceed the nominated word count, and make sure that you follow and comply with university plagiarism policies. Check your Turnitin score before you submit. I will certainly be doing that, and it's a remarkable tool. So please, no plagiarism. So ultimately, I expect that assignments will be presented on time. There is a very good reason for this. I can't release any marked assignment pieces back to students until all the assessment pieces have been uploaded. It's important as your professional responsibility to comply with deadlines. Now, having said all that, how do you go about presenting your work? Well, it needs to be professional. It needs to be presented in an appropriate manner. Please ensure that there are no spelling errors or grammatical errors or errors in relation to format. That's easier said than done. It's too easy sometimes to overlook issues that probably with hindsight are quite obvious. But Word, for example, does have some tricks that make it particularly easy. I would suggest that you don't submit your work if you've got any green or red underlining unattended. In Word, that means that there's an issue in terms of spelling or perhaps grammar. So there's a prompt, and there's therefore no excuse to submit work if you've already had the benefit of that prompt and you've chosen to ignore it. Now, for me, I suggest use of headings. Not every course coordinator will do that. So be aware that what I might like may to some degree be a personal preference and may not be reflected in what other course coordinators like. But I encourage the use of headings. I think it's a very good way to do it. Headings are not technically part of the word count, and you can use different fonts or italics if you wish, or if you prefer, you can just use the body of the paper. I would use Calabria or Arial font, 11, maybe 12. I'd go 1.5 line spacing, and very importantly, wherever appropriate, I would reference. In the law school faculty, we use footnote referencing, and in that regard, have a look at the Australian Guide to Legal Referencing and the Australian Guide to Legal Citation. I would number each page. Sometimes I'll refer to that as pagination. So have a number on each page. Make sure that you have a look at my sample document, and a cover sheet is not necessary, at least for me. Check with others. I'm going to share the screen now so you can have a look at what I've called John Milburn sample document. There's no particular magic in this. It's simply a document which I've prepared, which might assist you in terms of understanding my expectations and not necessarily something which is mandatory. Now, in this instance, you'll see that for the sample document, I've used a title, and I do use these styles in Word on a regular basis. Title, subtitle, etc. So here for the subheading, you'll see that it comes up as a subtitle, and so on. Other people like to use headings, and there's nothing wrong with that. You'll see I've moved across the heading and it's changed the way in which it appears on the screen. I'll now move back to the subtitle where it was. The document is intended to show you the sort of form of what I like to see, but it's not mandatory, as I said. In this instance, you'll see that I've got the normal font is 11 Calabri, and you'll see that I've used the different type of headings on the way through. I have included footnotes. Now, some people don't know how to use footnotes or how to insert them. It's very simple. So if I want to put in a footnote here after the word noticed, I will go into reference, insert a footnote, and it will come up here. Now the cursor's come up and it's automatically brought in number 4. I prefer that you tab and then type, and in this instance I'll delete that footnote, and it's gone, and what was originally footnote 4 is now back to being footnote number 4. A couple of things in terms of the way you prepare your work. You'll see that the case, in this instance Queensland Heritage Council, etc., against the Corporation of Sisters of Mercy of the Diocese of Townsville, it's typed in italics. It's a little bugbear of mine that people don't do that when they're putting in legal work, but case names and legislation should be in italics. And you'll see there that I've got the reference number 2 to the legal citation of the case. It's not a reference to the internet link, it's the formal legal citation. And you'll see on the screen there that it's in square brackets 2014 QCA 165. As an aside, you'll see square brackets are used where there is no volume number appropriate to the publication. So if, for example, it had been volume number 32, then the square brackets would be replaced with round brackets. So in this case, it is square brackets, and there is no volume. So that's the difference there. So actually, when you're going through this sample document, read the text, because the text is not meant to be just descriptive of the way I like the appearance, but actually to provide some content for your future reference. Now you'll see here that I've made the comment, cite by using the legal citation, not the internet citation. All right, now footnote number 3, I've said Justice Margaret McMurdo P, Her Honour President of the Court of Appeal. We've got her full name, which is unusual, but that's only just to distinguish her from Justice Philip McMurdo of the Supreme Court. District Court judges use the suffix DCJ. For example, Devereux DCJ is a District Court judge. Oh, and just as an aside, in a social context, you would refer to a Supreme Court judge or a District Court judge simply as judge. One other little bugbear of mine, I prefer in formal legal writing that you don't use the abbreviated form. So do not use the abbreviated form such as don't. Okay, on the second page, you'll see firstly that the page number is included, so it's paginated. You'll see that there is a heading. You don't have to do that. This is a document that I prepared using Word, I think 2010. For what it's worth, I actually prefer the formal styles in 2013 version, but this one is still the 2010 version. All right, now when you're using numbers, that can be indented, but that's straight out of the box, as it were. A couple of small things. If you're referring to an act, then capitalise that word, so it's capital ACT, as opposed to ACT uncapitalised. When you're referring to materials from an outside source, I would suggest that you indent and perhaps put in italics as well. And sometimes even change the font size is a good idea. So we'll just check. So here I've got the normal font on this is actually 12, not 11. And here I've reduced the font size to 11. And that's quite common. You don't have to have that in italics. That would be just as acceptable. All right, so presentation of your work, 1.5 line spacing for an assignment I think is a good idea. Remember, people need to read this, and having the 11 or 12 and 1.5 just makes it a bit easier to do that. One little trick, if you want to ensure consistency, and this is not meant to be, I'm not an expert in use of Word, but just a few things that I've picked up. Use this Format Painter. Double click on that, and once you've double clicked on that Format Painter, anything else that you paint, and you'll see the little paintbrush there, will follow that same format. So if you want this paragraph here to be the same as it was above, it will adopt that same format. So I'll just undo that and unclick the Format Painter now. Get rid of it. All right, so coming back to where I think we were, I do allow a double space between sentences. So you'll see that there's 1, 2 spaces there. It helps the reader. I use voice recognition software, so I don't have to do anything special. I dictate and that's what happens. Now, very importantly, be consistent in the presentation of your paper. Don't just arbitrarily change font or spacing or line spacing. It might be a giveaway that you've cut and pasted the material. Make sure you leave paragraphs between, space between paragraphs that's consistent. I then go on to talk about the benefits of using headers and footers and the content of the paper. Very importantly, use short sentences. This is an aid to the reader. And that's particularly the case as you draw the reader in during the introductory paragraphs. One of my favourite judges, Lord Denning, used this technique on a regular basis. So here's the start of a case written by Lord Denning. The customer pays his ticket and gets a ticket. He cannot refuse it. He cannot get the money back. He may protest to the machine, even swear at it, but it will remain unmoved. And you know, that's a great way to start a judgment. That's an actual decision. And the other one, in the summertime, village cricket is a delight to everyone. Nearly every village has its own cricket field where the young men play and the old men watch. In the village of Linst, in the county of Durham, they have their own ground where they've played for the last 70 years. They tend it well. The wicket area is well rolled and mown. The outkept is kept short, etc., etc. So this is a great way to write your legal material, and if it's good enough for Lord Denning, then I'd suggest it's good enough for you to consider. Don't overdo it, but sometimes typing a phrase or paragraphs in italics or perhaps a word in bold or underline can be a very good thing to do. Do try to write in the active rather than the passive style. So the difference is this: the accused hit the victim, as opposed to, and that's active, the victim was hit by the accused, which is passive. So always write in the active voice if you possibly can. Okay, so that's what we're after, that type of look. Lists, you can use lists, but be careful. It is possible, and it's quite easy for a reader to tend to gloss over chunks of material that have been introduced in a list. Now, do pay attention to your grammar and the spell checks that's built in. Before you submit your paper, upload it to 100% magnification. You can be adventurous. I encourage the use of graphics, flowcharts. These can be very interesting innovations. And write as if you are the educator, write with authority. And just finally, I mentioned about mistakes. So if, for example, I was to type in rubbish, Word will automatically correct that for me, which is great. But sometimes it won't do that, and you'll see the red underlining. So there's a spelling error. Just right click, it will select something that you want, so replace it. Now I'm trying to force the machine to say that something is grammatically not correct. That should do it. What I'm trying to do is find that green line. It's not coming up for me, but if you do see the green line, that's a prompt also to increase, to improve the grammar. So in this instance, what I need you to do is to ensure that when you're writing your legal material, you do so carefully, and you make sure that the material is presented in a very professional manner. It's very important. Thank you very much for listening.